My dad chose his new girlfriend over me, so I moved in with my estranged mom. Now, my life and family dynamics have shifted dramatically. I never really understood what it was like to have a complete family. My mom, Lisa, 40, left when I was just 3 years old. Dad, 41, always told me it was because she couldn't handle the responsibilities of being a parent. I am Alex, 16, and for as long as I can remember, it's just been Dad and me against the world. Growing up, I'd watch other kids with their moms at school events or in the park, and I'd feel this deep ache in my heart. Dad tried his best to fill that void. He came to my basketball games, cheered louder than anyone else, helped me with my homework, and even attempted to teach me how to ride a bike, which ended with both of us covered in scrapes but laughing nonetheless. Dad worked tirelessly to provide for me. He's a mechanic at a local shop, often taking extra shifts to make ends meet. I remember countless nights falling asleep to the sound of him tinkering in the garage long after his shift had ended. Despite the long hours, he always made time for me. Our Saturday night game nights became a cherished tradition, complete with homemade snacks and cozy blankets. As for my mom, Lisa was more of a distant memory than a real person in my life. She'd send birthday cards occasionally, usually with a $20 bill tucked inside. No personal message, just a generic happy birthday and her signature. Dad always said she was welcome to be part of my life if she wanted, but she never made the effort. When I was younger, I'd obsess over those cards, trying to find some hidden meaning in her handwriting. But as I grew older, I just accepted that this was how things were. I threw myself into sports as a way to express all the complicated feelings I had about my family situation. My room became a mini shrine to my achievements. Dad always encouraged my passion, even when I went through a phase of being obsessed with basketball. Things changed last year when Dad met Ryan, 42, at a friend's barbecue. Ryan had been trying to set Dad up for years, but Dad always declined, saying he was too busy with work and raising me. But this time something clicked. I remember Dad coming home from that barbecue with a spark in his eyes I hadn't seen before. At first, I was happy for him. Ryan seemed nice enough. He'd come over for dinner, bringing flowers for Dad and always asking about my day at school. He works as a graphic designer and even helped me with a school project once, showing me how to improve my presentation skills. I thought maybe this was our chance at having a complete family, but things started to change when they got more serious. Dad began spending more time with Ryan, and our Saturday game nights became less frequent. I tried not to be jealous, reminding myself that Dad deserved to have someone special in his life after all those years of just focusing on me. About 6 months into their relationship, Dad sat me down for a talk. I thought maybe he was going to tell me they were getting married or something. Instead, he dropped a bombshell. Ryan was moving in with us. I was shocked because it felt too soon, but I didn't want to rain on his parade. He looked so happy, and I thought maybe I was just being selfish. The problem started when Ryan actually moved in last month. He brought his son Ethan, 14, with him. This was news to me. Dad had never mentioned Ryan had a kid. Apparently, Ethan's mom passed away when he was young, and he's been living with Ryan ever since. I felt blindsided. Not only was I getting a stepdad I barely knew, but I was also suddenly acquiring a stepbrother. Our house isn't huge, but it was always comfortable for Dad and me. We have 3 bedrooms, one for each of us, and a guest room that doubled as my study. When Ryan and Ethan moved in, Dad suggested that Ethan take the guest room and I share with him. I was upset but tried to be understanding. After all, Ethan was younger and probably needed his own space to adjust to the new living situation. Sharing a room with Dad has been tough. I am a teenager and need my privacy. Plus, Dad snores, which makes it hard for me to sleep. I've been struggling in school because I am always tired. My coach even pulled me aside last week to ask if everything was okay at home because my performance hasn't been up to its usual standard. When I tried to talk to Dad about it, he just said I needed to adjust and be more welcoming to our new family members. He reminded me of all the times we talked about wanting a bigger family, but this wasn't what I had in mind. I wanted a dad who had been there from the beginning, not a ready-made family that was disrupting everything I knew. Things got worse last week when I overheard Ryan and Dad discussing redecorating the guest room, now Ethan's room, to make it more his style. They were planning to buy him new furniture and even repaint the walls. Meanwhile, I was sleeping on an air mattress in Dad's room, surrounded by boxes of my stuff that didn't fit anywhere else. I couldn't hold it in anymore and confronted Dad. I asked him why Ethan got his own room while I was forced to share. I reminded him that this was my home first, That I'd lived here my whole life, and suddenly I was the one who had to give up my space. Dad got defensive and said I was being selfish and that I should be happy we had a family now. He said Ethan needed his own space because he was still adjusting to the move, but what about my adjustment? I was the one who had to give up my room, my privacy, and even my study space. The living room was always occupied by Ryan watching sports or Ethan and his new friends hanging out. I had nowhere to study or relax anymore, and it felt like a part of me was slowly disappearing. I felt like I was being pushed aside in my own home. Ryan and Ethan had taken over, and Dad seemed to care more about making them comfortable than about my feelings. Last night, I found some of my old trophies that used to be displayed in the living room stuffed in a box in the garage. When I asked Dad about it, he said he thought it might make Ethan uncomfortable to see so many reminders that this was my home before they moved in. It felt like he was trying to erase my presence from the house. I don't know what to do. I've tried talking to Dad, but he doesn't listen. He's so focused on making this new family work that he can't see how much it's hurting me. I am tempted to reach out to my mom, even though we're not close, just to have someone on my side, but I am scared that might make things even worse with Dad. Sometimes I find myself looking at those old birthday cards from my mom, wondering if things would be different if she had stayed. Would Dad be so eager to replace our life with this new family? Would I feel so lost and out of place in my own home? Am I being unreasonable here? Should I just suck it up and accept that this is how things are now? Or do I have a right to be upset about losing my space, my privacy, and what feels like my place in Dad's life? First update. It's been about a month since my last post, and I wish I could say things have gotten better, but they've only gotten worse. I took some of the advice from the comments and tried to have another calm conversation with Dad. I prepared what I wanted to say, even practicing in front of the mirror to make sure I wouldn't get too emotional. I chose a time when Ryan and Ethan were out, hoping Dad would be more receptive without them around. I explained how the lack of privacy was affecting my schoolwork and mental health. I told him about how my coach had noticed a decline in my performance and how I felt like I was losing a part of myself without a space to study. I even suggested we look into bunk beds for my room to at least give me some semblance of my own space. Dad seemed to listen at first. He had that concerned look on his face that I remember from when I was little and would come to him with scraped knees or hurt feelings. For a moment, I thought maybe he was finally understanding how serious this was for me, but then Ryan walked in. He'd come home early from work, and when he heard what we were discussing, he got upset. He said I was being ungrateful, and that I should be thankful they didn't kick me out entirely. He went on about how much they do for me, how I have a roof over my head and food on the table. Dad didn't even defend me. He just stood there silently while Ryan ranted about how I needed to grow up and stop being so selfish. I was stunned. This man, who had only been in my life for a few months, was telling me I should be grateful to live in my own home, and Dad, who had always been my fierce protector, said nothing. It felt like the final betrayal. After that confrontation, I knew I needed to do something. I remembered an old birthday card from my mom that I kept hidden in my journal. It had her email address on it. With shaking hands, I typed out a message to her explaining everything that had been happening. I didn't expect much. After all, she had never shown much interest in my life before. To my surprise, she responded quickly. Her message was full of apologies for not being there for me and promises to make things right. At first, I was skeptical. Where had this concern been for the past 15 years? But as we started talking more regularly, I found myself looking forward to our conversations. Mom seemed genuinely interested in my life. She asked about school, my hobbies, and even remembered details about things I'd mentioned in previous conversations. When I told her about my sports, she asked to come to one of my games. About 2 weeks ago, Mom dropped a bombshell. She said she'd been thinking a lot about our relationship and wanted to make up for lost time. She asked if I'd consider moving in with her. She lives in the same city, about 30 minutes away, and said I could keep going to my current school. She even offered to set up a study space for me in her home. I was conflicted. On one hand, I barely knew my mom. What if she changed her mind once I moved in? What if she was just feeling guilty and would lose interest once the novelty wore off? On the other hand, things at home with Dad, Ryan, and Ethan were becoming unbearable. Ethan had started inviting friends over all the time, and they took over the living room, leaving me with nowhere to study or relax. After a lot of thought, I decided to tell Dad about Mom's offer. I thought maybe it would be a wake-up call for him to realize how serious the situation was. I chose a moment when we were alone, hoping he'd be more receptive without Ryan around. I was wrong. Dad exploded. He accused me of betraying him, and said I was choosing an absent mother over him after everything he'd done for me. He brought up every sacrifice he'd ever made, every late night he'd worked to provide for me. He said I was ungrateful, and that he couldn't believe I would even consider leaving him for a woman who had abandoned us. The argument got heated, and Ryan got involved again. He suggested that maybe it would be better if I did leave, saying I was causing too much stress in the household. He said that Ethan was settling in well and that my attitude was disrupting the family harmony they were trying to build. Dad didn't contradict him, which hurt more than anything else. That was the last straw for me. I packed a bag and called my mom. She came to pick me up, and I've been staying with her for the past week. It's been an adjustment, but she's really trying to make me feel comfortable. She cleared out a room for me and even took time off work to help me settle in. She's been patient with me as I navigate this new living situation, giving me space when I need it, but also making an effort to connect. One of the first things Mom did was take me shopping for sports gear. She let me pick out whatever I wanted, saying she wanted to support my passion. Mom has been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between angry messages and pleading for me to come home. She's accused me of trying to tear our family apart and says that I am being selfish for choosing my own comfort over her happiness. I am not sure what to do now. Part of me wants to go back because I feel guilty. Dad sacrificed so much for me, and I know he must be hurting. But another part of me is enjoying having my own space and feeling valued. Mom seems genuinely interested in getting to know me and supporting my interests. I am torn between giving Dad another chance and staying with Mom. I don't want to lose my relationship with Dad, but I also don't want to go back to feeling like a second-class citizen in my own home. The stability I am feeling at Mom's place is something I haven't experienced in a long time, but is it wrong to choose this over the father who raised me? I am also worried about the long-term consequences of this decision. Will this create a permanent rift between me and Dad? Am I being selfish for choosing my own comfort over his happiness? And what if things don't work out with Mom? Will I have burned all my bridges? Any advice on how to handle this situation would be greatly appreciated. I feel like I am standing at a crossroads and I am terrified of making the wrong choice. Second update. It's been 2 months since I moved in with my mom, and a lot has happened. Living with her has been an adjustment, but overall it's been good. We've fallen into a comfortable routine, and I feel like I have a stable home life for the first time in a long while. Mom convinced me to try therapy, and it's been helping me process everything that happened with Dad. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, has been great at helping me understand my feelings and set healthy boundaries. We've been working on my trust issues and how to communicate my needs more effectively. As for Dad, we've slowly been rebuilding our relationship. At first, I was hesitant to even talk to him, but Dr. Martinez encouraged me to at least hear him out. We started with short phone calls, which gradually became longer conversations. About 2 months ago, Dad asked if we could meet in person. We met at a cafe, a neutral ground for both of us. He apologized again for everything that had happened and admitted he'd been seeing a therapist too. He said he realized he had been so afraid of losing me that he prioritized his relationship with Ryan over our relationship. Dad told me that he and Ryan had broken up for good. He said he needed to focus on himself and on repairing our relationship. I appreciated his honesty, but I made it clear that I wasn't ready to move back in with him. We agreed to take things slow and rebuild our trust gradually. We've been having weekly dinners together, sometimes with Mom joining us. It's a bit awkward, but they're both making an effort to co-parent peacefully. Dad has even started taking an interest in my sports, something he never really did before. Last week, he came to one of my games and seemed genuinely proud of my performance. As for me, I am doing much better. My grades have improved, and I've been accepted into a great sports program for college next year. Mom has been incredibly supportive, helping me with applications and even taking me on college tours. She's promised to help set up a training space in my dorm room, which I am really excited about. I am still living with Mom and plan to stay with her until I leave for college. Dad and I are slowly rebuilding trust, but it's going to take time. I am just grateful to have 2 parents who are now putting in the effort to be there for me. This whole experience has taught me a lot about standing up for myself and the importance of communication. While it was a difficult journey, I feel like I've come out stronger on the other side. I am cautiously optimistic about the future and looking forward to starting this new chapter in my life.